Hello, my name is Dmitry Sitkovetsky. I'm a violinist and conductor, and today I'm leaving my house in London to visit one of my good friends. I met Sir Neville Marriner in late 1980s, when I was only thinking of creating my own chamber orchestra and of starting to conduct. It was he who became a great example for me as a sensitive and wise leader who was always in touch with his fellow musicians. Sir Neville Marriner never considered himself a leader with a capital L. He never put himself above his musicians. And in spite of his world fame, he never thought that his job as a conductor was superior to the rest. This calm and dignified approach to fame and relentless drive to perfection are the main ingredients of his success and longevity as a performer. So allow me to introduce you one of the great conductors and a dear colleague of mine, Sir Neville Marriner.
Hi, Neville.
Good morning.
So good to see you.
What a pleasure.
What a beautiful house you have. Oh,
Especially prepared for you.
Especially prepared for
Yes.
Do you mind to show me around
No,
first?
not at all.
Wonderful. So let's...
Sure. Be careful.
Thank you. Yes. How old is this house?
Well, I think it started in the 17th century. It's been a worker's house all this. It was a farmer's cottage, really, to begin with. It's slightly grown over the years. But now this is really our principal home. Living in London, living in London's not much fun anymore.
Yeah, I understand.
I can work more down here. You have time to think, but in London, there's always a telephone or something.
Too busy, exactly.
Too busy, too many people.
Yes.
Just too hectic to live there now. I think when you're young, it's fine. You can. There's always some activity.
Yes.
But here you need a little bit of peace and quiet if you're going to work seriously.
Of course, and that is very inspiring.
Well,
I mean, to have your own river.
It's a good friend. It's a bitter enemy. When it comes up here, it's less of a friend.
Less of a friend.
But we have the fish and we have the fowl and we even have salmon that come up the river.
My goodness,
here.
really up the street?
Yeah, they come all the way from the Axe River.
That's extraordinary. Rainbow, that is beautiful. It's a miracle of nature.
It is.
Miracle. Yes. And the other miracle is rain, of course. We should perhaps
we get used to it. Perhaps you'd prefer to go inside. These chaps are looking a little bit...
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Come this way, because I think you'll be a little bit more comfortable here anyway.
And warmer.
Try that.
And warmer. Terrific.
Yes, I think so.
Look what I have found.
Ah!
I brought you.
A treasure from the past.
Yes, exactly. One of first of our several recordings of major violin repertoire.
That was great. I remember this. Yes, and with the romances too.
With the romances, exactly. And next came Brahms and Mendelssohn and
Tchaikovsky,
and then
and Brahms,
and then the last one was Sibelius.
Sibelius,
exactly.
yes, he was.
Exactly, and all
Gosh, it makes you feel old when you hear all these.
It seems like it was yesterday, and you haven't changed at all.
You've grown a beard since then. I just wonder, is it more difficult to play the violin with a beard or without?
I think it hides some out-of-tune notes. They get stuck here. It's easy to hold it.
It's easy. Anyway, yes. Yes, indeed.
I would love to know the very beginning. In the 50s, you were still playing in London Symphony. What was the main reason for you to stand up from the ranks?
That there were several of us of the same age that had suddenly come into the London Symphony Orchestra. And we thought this was a wonderful new experience, new repertoire, experience with great musicians, conductors, soloists. But after a year or two, I think we all decided that it was not the way we wanted to spend the rest of our lives, that we wanted more individual responsibility.
Of course.
Just something of your own that you were putting into the music. For a couple of years, just a few of us used to meet in my house in London and just to play without a conductor, independently, music of our choice. So that that was our growing up, really, as an ensemble. But it really was generally dissatisfaction with the prospect of always having someone.
Yeah, I understand. You did it just for your own pleasure at first.
Absolutely.
You didn't think that it would become...
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No, we were certainly looking just for our own pleasure. Very selfish, really. We didn't want to give concerts. We just wanted to enjoy ourselves playing music.
But it's also very idealistic because, you know, we always try to see why this profession has become like a trade. You know, oh, you just plow your trade and everything. Where is the joy? Where is the excitement of doing something for the first time, just for your own enjoyment?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And also, with a group that size, everyone has a voice.
Of course.
You know, everyone had something to offer, an opinion about the music, about the style, about the tempo, about the temperature of the room. But at least they had a voice, and they felt independence.
So it was really a group, an ensemble of players. It wasn't just you saying, well, let's gather,
It was a common interest. It really was that everyone felt that it was their idea.
Wonderful. How did you come to the name? Name is, for me, it's a miracle of something that should have never worked in a million years.
Absolutely, yes.
Academy, St. Martin's in the Fields.
Yes.
The most cumbersome, longest, unmarketable name you can imagine. Now, the most famous name of all the chamber orchestras in history.
Well, it was really, we were rehearsing in London, and our keyboard player was a man called Jack Churchill.
Right.
Now, his Sunday job was to play the organ in St. Martin in the Fields. And at one of our rehearsals, after about 2 years, he said, why don't we give a concert? And we said, no concert, please. No, this is just for us. And he said, well, the church, you know, would like you to just to present some music there because we need some interest, you know, from the public. And it would be wonderful if you came just one Sunday after the service had happened, because there are always a few people stay to keep warm, and people walk in from the street. We get an audience of some sort. And so we said, well, fine, okay. But then the vicar called us, for the vicar of the church, and said, what are you going to call yourselves? And we thought about this. We don't want to be a chamber orchestra. We don't want to be a small orchestra, a sinfonietta. We went through lots of names which didn't feel very attractive. And he said, well, you know, in the 17th century here, around the church in St. Martin's Lane, there were a collection of interested people. They were called academies, Academy of Literature, Academy of Medicine, and they were just groups of people with similar interests who wanted to get together. And they called themselves academies. Call yourself. So we said, fine, we are the Academy. Ah, he said, but you haven't mentioned the church. And we said, well, we're not going to be here forever. And he said, yes, but we are offering you hospitality for years. So we said, well, Academy of St. Martin. And he said, well, Yes, but, we really liked the whole issue. So for the first concert, we called ourselves the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. Ridiculous. It was too long, wouldn't fit on the poster.
That's a fascinating story. This is the first time I hear about it. It's really...
Beginning of
just the beginning
interest
of a
in the
great,
Academy. What happened eventually was, because subsequent records were so familiar, they travelled around Europe,
right,
that Hans Ulrich eventually said, sorry, go back to the original name, Academy of St. Martin in the Fields.
So they tried different name and just
Absolutely,
never worked.
didn't work.
It's incredible. I noticed that orchestras like Stuttgart's with Karl Münchinger or Rudolf Barschai and Moscow Chamber Orchestra, they rose with their music directors, with their founders, and they had their wonderful time. And then when they were no longer there, they kind of disappeared from that privileged position. How come that your group, which was started so long ago, never really had that situation? What do you think is the secret of the longevity of the Academy St. Martin?
I think I've not been allowed to grow like that because of my wife. Or my children.
Really?
They are very good at perceiving me as becoming unnaturally grand. It is so easy, actually, because you're in a position of authority,
of course,
to indulge this. And I know perfectly well it doesn't suit me. It doesn't even suit me to lose my temper. I know if I lose my temper, I become utterly ridiculous. I think a famous occasion when I slammed down the score in Maida Vale studios for the BBC and stalked out of the studio and immediately fell down the steps.
You did?
Yes, which is typical of me trying to be authoritative and grand. You can only really get the results that I want, really, from a collaboration, which is really intuitive. It has to be so close. I think we were extraordinarily fortunate that the sort of repertoire that we were playing at that time was not very familiar. And so there was a certain amount of interest in that, but also the beginning of the recording industry, the glory days of making records. Right. So we spent perhaps 20 years, the first 20 years of the Academy's life, really making gramophone records. Periodically we would go on a tournée, really to justify our existence. In fact, one of the problems when you go to foreign parts, in distant parts of Australia, for instance, where concert halls are not wonderful, to make yourself sound as good as your recordings, which was what they were expecting, is quite difficult. So the standard of performance had to be maintained at a very high level all the time. You were always recording, always rehearsing to try and keep the sound the way that people would expect when they came. Because the gramophone records had made our fortune for us, our artistic fortune, certainly. Really rehearsing uneconomically many times. You know, the number of rehearsals you had to do for a concert would by no means pay for the cost of the concert. But it was important to sustain it at that level all the time. And we were, of course, very much supported by the income from recordings.
Royalties, yes.
So I feel that we were just enormously fortunate to find this period, because we made, first of all, LPs, of course, which were wonderful, big pieces of publicity that went around the world, and then we did it all again with CDs.
Yes. It's known that you've recorded more than any living or not living anymore conductor in the world. So you're clearly the master of that medium. But you also have given many concerts over the years, and you continue to give them. In your approach, is it a difference is it a big difference between performing in the studio, where you spend days and months and years, and in the concert situation?
I think for concerts, I find sometimes I must compromise. That rehearsal time is never quite enough to guarantee perfection at the concerts. So you have to live on the energy of the orchestra very much. When you're making a recording, if you don't get the sound you want, you do it again. And you work until you get the sound you want. And that is as close to, not perfection, but as good as you can make it. With a concert, I always feel there are some things I'd love to do again. You know, what an idiot. You know, why? What was I thinking of? You don't have a second chance with a concert. But in the studio, I try to make the orchestra feel as if it is a performance too. The walls don't exist. You know, the microphone doesn't exist. You're playing a concert again. But of course, with immense concentration, because the microphones are unforgiving, and the smallest blemish, and you're in trouble. So I do feel sometimes, exciting as concerts are, I sometimes feel I had to compromise a little bit because I didn't spend enough time achieving the sound that I really wanted.
So, but there is no audience in the studio. That element is missing. Doesn't it disturb you?
I've never missed an audience in the studio, but I'm very aware of it, of course, in the concerts. They do add.
And to recreate that, the best recordings always sound like it's just being done now.
Exactly.
And to get that energy and that kind of a connection, I think, for me, always the sign of a great recording, because it feels like, oh, you can't stop listening to it. You can't just,
Absolutely. That's the ambition, really, to make it sound as if the audience is there. You certainly do miss a little of the electricity, the energy that comes from an audience there. But also you can stimulate an orchestra into the sensation that it is important to give this concert, this performance, as if it were a concert. And we've been lucky, generally because the musicians are quite young.
Right.
And for them, even playing it for the 10th time, it's still a new experience. It's not the 110th time they're playing it. So you still do have this vitality that comes from the orchestra, which is absolutely vital.
The famous recording for a wonderful film, Amadeus, was made by you and the Academy. How and where it was recorded?
Well, it was conceived very much here, in this house with Milos Forman, with Peter Schaffer. We spent a weekend here deciding what music we are going to use, because in the play, if you remember, the play came first, it had about 6 minutes music. In the film, they wanted 66 minutes music, a lot of music. And so we had to decide theatrically and musically which were the most, the best places for the music. So we decided it here. And then we went to Abbey Road Studios and recorded all the music without, not one frame of film was shot.
Nothing was filmed.
Nothing was filmed at all. And at the beginning, Milos Forman, of course, he was very nervous about, he didn't know so much about Mozart. Peter Schaffer had been a music critic in his early years, so he knew what he was doing. But by the time we'd recorded all the music, Milos Forman was a great authority on Mozart, and he was very good. He took the music to Prague and shot the film while the music was playing. So that in each of his big episodes, the music was playing while the actors were doing their stuff.
So they never had it dry.
Never had it dry.
Never had it dry. That's fantastic. That's a great idea.
It was unique, of course. As you know, music comes at the end of most filmmaking.
So you've conducted for so many years and in so many continents. Been music director in America, Germany, and of course here in Japan. What is the role of Russian music in your repertoire and also the Russian performers that you've performed with over the years?
I think it's been largely admiration. Because I was a violin player, you always looked to Russia for the virtuosi of the century. And so I was always slightly in awe of the potential of Russian players. For instance, when Barshai started the Moscow Chamber Orchestra, such virtuosity was unheard of. Quite different from Munchinger in Stuttgart. They were interested perhaps in a German sound which they wanted to create. With the Moscow Chamber Orchestra, you felt they could play anything. And it was always quite astonishing for us to hear their performances. I think as far as the repertoire is concerned, I came to it very late because I didn't really start taking an interest in 19th and 20th century music until very late, until the Academy had grown bigger.
Right.
As long as the Academy was small, then we were limited with the sort of repertoire we could play, and it was sort of 18th century most of the time, sometimes contemporary music as well. 19th century was forgotten. I came to Russian music really quite late. But it's very refreshing because there's always something new, and it's very exciting when you suddenly find that you have an interest for completely different sort of repertoire, the size of the orchestra, of course, the indulgent way that you can perform. And so I think I've always felt I can let my hair down a little bit longer when I'm playing Russian music.
Exactly.
That sort of temperament is enormously appealing, I think, to us. I've changed aeroplanes at Moscow Airport, and that's the closest I've been to.
Never actually set foot on the Russian.
Set foot in Russia at all.
I think we should do something about it. How about if we meet next time on stage in Moscow?
What a good idea.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time, and it has been a great pleasure.
For me too.
Great pleasure.
Indeed.
Thank you, Neville.
A great pleasure. Well, it's wonderful to see you under pleasant circumstances.
Really. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
I can talk endless hours with my dear Neville. Gain so much from his great experience, discuss our concert, tours. His life and wisdom in the world of music is quite unique. But the day is drawing to an end, And there is still a long trip back to London. Thanks for spending the day with me. See you next time.